Man, it feels like every day there's a new headline about some crazy cyber attack or vulnerability, doesn't it? It's hard to keep up with.
Yeah, it can definitely feel like you're drinking from a fire hose sometimes. Trying to sift through all that noise and figure out what really matters is a challenge in itself, especially with the ways things are changing.
It's why we do this deep dive, right? Dive deep into the research, pull out the key points, and try to make some sense of it all for everyone listening. And today we're tackling a big one: how AI is changing the whole cyber attack game.
Oh yeah, this one's huge. We've got a whole pile of fascinating research for this one. Starting with a paper, A Framework for Evaluating Emerging Cyber Attack Capabilities of AI from basically a place for researchers to share their work. We've also got some interesting perspectives from Google DeepMind and Gigazine, a white paper from CLTC Berkeley looking at how AI can be used for good or bad, some strategies for securing AI systems from Arctic Wolf, and a benchmark survey report from Hyperproof on AI and cybersecurity.
So, a lot to unpack here. But today's mission is clear. We got to figure out what this new framework for evaluating AI cyber attack potential is all about and what it means for the future of defending ourselves. Like, how do we actually protect ourselves in this new world?
Absolutely. Getting a clear picture of the real risks here, and thinking proactively about the best defenses. How do we stay ahead of the curve?
Couldn't agree more. And before we go any further, huge thanks to our sponsors who make this deep dive possible: riskasses.com and globalcompliancemap.com. Okay, let's get into it. So it seems like the core issue is that while AI is already helping us defend against cyber attacks, it also has the potential to give attackers a massive boost.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. AI is becoming more and more powerful, so it's already being used to detect threats and respond to incidents much faster than humans ever could. But the flip side is that it could also become a really powerful tool for the bad guys, right? The Arcus paper really highlights how our current ways of evaluating these threats just aren't systematic enough.
Okay, systematic, you mean there's no real standardized way to assess these risks across the board.
Exactly. We haven't really had a unified approach to look at, say, the different stages of a cyber attack and pinpoint where AI could have the biggest impact. And this is where this new framework comes in. It's trying to create a system.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me about it. What makes this framework so special?
Well, what's really neat is that it builds on this idea of the cyber attack chain. You can think of this chain as a roadmap for an attacker, outlining the steps they take from initial reconnaissance all the way to achieving their ultimate objective, right? And you can actually see a visual representation of this in figure 1 of the paper. So this new framework uses that same structure, that same step-by-step breakdown, but specifically for attacks that involve AI.
So instead of just looking at AI in a vacuum, it considers how AI could be woven into each phase of an attack.
Exactly, which gives us a much broader picture of how AI could be abused. The framework is all about finding those gaps in how we currently evaluate threats, helping defenders like us prioritize resources and bolster defenses where they're needed most. It can even be used for what's called AI-enabled adversary emulation, basically using AI to simulate really advanced attacks, almost like a super-powered red team.
That's smart, right? Getting ahead of the bad guys by thinking like them, but with AI. Now, the paper mentions Google's threat intelligence group did some interesting analysis. What did they find?
So Google's Threat Intelligence Group, they analyzed over 12,000 real-world attempts to use AI in cyber attacks. And get this, these attacks span more than 20 countries. That's a ton of data, and it provided a lot of insight for this framework. From all those attacks, they managed to identify 7 recurring patterns, 7 archetypes.
7 patterns. That suggests there's some, consistency in how AI is being used offensively. Was there anything... any common threads in those patterns that stood out?
Yeah, the analysis highlighted the stages in the attack chain that were most vulnerable to, let's say, AI enhancement, which leads to this idea of bottleneck analysis.
Bottleneck analysis. I like the sound of that. Break it down for us.
Sure. Think of the attack chain as a pipeline, right? Bottlenecks are those points in the pipeline where attackers hit a wall. They require a lot of time, specialized skills, or resources, so things that slow them down. Figure 2 in the paper really illustrates this. So by figuring out where those bottlenecks are, we can focus our defenses on those specific areas because that's where AI could have the most disruptive impact, smoothing out those rough edges for the attackers.
So it's about predicting where AI could give attackers the biggest bang for their buck.
You got it. And the paper points out a few ways AI could do this. First, capability uplift, making those sophisticated cyber skills more accessible to, let's say, less skilled attackers. Then there's throughput uplift, which is all about increasing the speed and scale of attacks. And finally, novel risks from autonomous systems. We're talking about AI agents carrying out reconnaissance, running social engineering scams, even operating within a network without needing a human at the controls.
Autonomous AI attackers. That's kind of scary, but it seems like the next logical step.
Yeah.
The paper also touches on how well those advanced AI models are performing in cybersecurity challenges, things like capture the flag. What does that tell us about this framework?
Yeah, so top-tier AI models are showing some pretty impressive cyber skills in controlled environments, like those capture the flag competitions you mentioned. Figure 3 in the paper actually talks about this, but the paper really stresses that the real challenge is translating those successes in a controlled environment into practical defenses in the messy real world.
Right. Just because an AI can solve a complex coding puzzle in a game doesn't mean it can automatically defend against an AI using similar techniques in a real attack.
Right. A simulation is one thing. Navigating a live network is a whole other beast. I also saw this phrase, basket of cyber goods. That's a pretty interesting way to put it.
It is. It's an analogy, really. To understand how AI might change let's say, the economics of cyberattacks, the researchers use this basket of cyber goods analogy. Basically, it's a collection of common attack methods, your usual suspects, based on real-world threat intelligence. By looking at how AI advancements could make each good in that basket easier, faster, or cheaper to execute, we start to get a clearer understanding of how the risks are changing. So it's a way to measure basically how AI is making cyber attacks more efficient or less costly for the attackers.
Exactly. And that brings us to the 4 stages of their evaluation framework, which you can see in Figure 4. Stage 1, they create that basket of representative attack chains we just discussed. This draws from Google's threat intelligence data, as well as insights from companies like Mandiant. They cover a pretty broad spectrum, everything from your basic phishing and malware, all the way to supply chain attacks and those targeting IoT devices and cloud infrastructure. So a really good overview of the current threat landscape is the foundation here.
Got it. So what's stage 2?
Bottleneck analysis. Just like we talked about before, they take those curated attack chains and bring them down, looking for those traditional bottlenecks, the points where attackers usually hit those snags in terms of time, effort, knowledge, and scalability. Figure 6 in the paper actually visualizes this impact and likelihood analysis for identifying bottlenecks.
Okay, it makes sense. Pinpoint the attacker's weaknesses, because that's where AI could give them the biggest advantage. What's next? Stage 3.
All right, so stage 3 is where they get into actually designing those evaluations for cybersecurity models. So for each bottleneck, they design very specific tests. And the goal is to measure an AI model's ability to lower the bar at that point. Like, can it make it easier to break through? The cool thing here is they're trying to design these evaluations to mimic real-world conditions and actually quantify how much easier AI makes things for the attacker.
So what are they measuring exactly?
A few things. There's time to completion. Basically, how much faster can AI do the task at that bottleneck? Then there's success rate, or how much more reliably can AI achieve the objective? They even look at capability level required, like how much easier does AI make it for someone without a lot of skills to carry out the attack? And finally, scalability metrics, which look at how much AI can help attackers broaden their reach.
So they're quantifying AI's impact on each step of the attack. Interesting. What's the last stage?
Stage 4 is where they put it all together. They run the tests, collect all that data on how much AI reduces the costs and difficulties for the attacker, and then they combine it all to create an overall cost differential score. This score essentially tells you how much that specific AI model could enhance offensive cyber capabilities across a range of attack scenarios. Higher score, scarier potential.
So they're not just trying to understand AI's potential, but also giving us a way to actually measure the increased risk. That's pretty smart.
It is. And to really test their framework, they teamed up with Pattern Labs to create a benchmark of 50 new challenges that span the entire attack chain. And these are all new challenges, not based on anything publicly known, which makes the test a lot more realistic,
Yeah, keeping it fresh is important for a real assessment. So what happened when they put some of those AI models to the test? What were the initial findings?
They used an experimental version of Gemini 2.0 Flash for this round of evaluations, and their big takeaway was that while current AI, on its own, might not be causing massive disruption right now, it's clear that the threat landscape is going to change in a big way. Think evolution, not revolution, at least for now.
So not a total game changer right this second, but definitely a force to be reckoned with in the future. The paper also highlights certain phases of an attack that often get overlooked, when we're evaluating AI's potential. What are those?
Yeah, this is a really important point. A lot of the focus is on AI doing things like finding vulnerabilities and creating exploits, right? But their analysis found that AI could be incredibly effective in areas we don't always think about. Things like evasion, making the attacker's presence harder to detect, detection avoidance, making it tough for security systems to spot malicious activity, obfuscation, making code or actions hard to understand, and persistence, maintaining that long-term access to a system without getting caught.
Evasion and persistence? That's the stuff that keeps the attacker hidden and in control. If AI can make those things easier, that's a huge problem for defenders.
For sure, and this is where that framework comes in again. It helps us find those blind spots, the areas where we need to bolster our defenses, because that's where AI could give attackers a significant advantage.
Right. So it's not just about knowing what AI can do, but understanding where it's most likely to have a real-world impact and where we're most vulnerable to those AI-powered techniques.
Exactly. The framework guides the development and deployment of targeted mitigations, basically specific defenses designed to counter those AI-enhanced capabilities. And, like we talked about before, it can be used for AI-enabled adversary emulation, which Figure 15 illustrates, basically using AI to create realistic, very advanced attack simulations. It's the next step in security testing.
AI fighting AI. Pretty cool, actually. And Figure 16 shows how the framework can be used to benchmark how effective our defenses really are, right?
You got it. The framework can be used to measure how well our defenses are doing by looking at the costs they impose on attackers trying to use AI. If our defenses make it significantly harder, slower, or riskier for them, then we know they're working.
Okay, so let's get specific. How might AI change something like phishing attacks? Like, what could that look like?
Oh, AI could be a real game changer for phishing through something called hyper-personalization. Imagine AI analyzing massive amounts of data, everything from browsing history to social media activity, to create phishing emails that are so targeted and convincing they're almost impossible to spot. AI could tailor each email specifically to the individual, making it way more effective than your average mass phishing campaign.
Wow, that's a whole new level of phishing. What about malware? How could AI make that worse?
With malware, AI could be used to create new types of malware and make existing malware harder to detect. We could see AI generating what's called polymorphic malware, which constantly changes its code to avoid detection by those traditional signature-based security tools. AI could also be used to analyze sandbox environments, those isolated systems we use to test malware, and figure out how to avoid setting off any alarms.
So not only more adaptable malware, but malware that's better at hiding, sneaky. How about something more technical, like SQL injection?
AI could have a huge impact on SQL injection, which is a pretty common vulnerability in web applications. We could see AI automating the scanning process, finding those vulnerabilities much faster than humans can. And when it comes to exploiting those vulnerabilities, AI could create smarter SQL injection payloads, the malicious code used to attack the system, that can bypass web application firewalls, the security systems meant to protect those websites. Even in really complex scenarios, like blind SQL injection, AI could speed up the whole process and learn ways to get around security measures.
So even highly technical attacks become easier and faster with AI. What about those really scary vulnerabilities, zero-day exploits?
Yeah.
The ones nobody knows about yet.
Yeah, finding zero-day vulnerabilities is really difficult and time-consuming. It requires a ton of expertise. Now, while the paper suggests that AI might not be able to instantly find those exploits, it could definitely help identify potential targets and even assist in the initial stages of vulnerability research by spotting strange patterns or anomalies in code.
It really shows how important frameworks like the cyberattack chain and IRE, ATT, and CK are. They help us prioritize our resources and make sense of this evolving threat landscape, especially with AI in the mix.
Absolutely. Those frameworks give us a common language, a way to categorize and understand these techniques. That's critical when we're trying to figure out where AI is going to amplify the risks.
One thing that surprised me in the Hyperproof report was that only a tiny percentage of organizations are actually planning to block generative AI. It seems like AI is becoming a pretty standard business tool.
Yeah, that was an interesting finding. It shows that most organizations see the value of AI, for improving efficiency and all that. But it also means we need to be even more careful about the risks, especially security risks. We can't just ignore them.
And speaking of those risks and benefits, the white paper from CLTC Berkeley really emphasizes the dual-use nature of AI in cybersecurity. It could be a tool for good or bad.
Yeah, that's a really important point. AI itself isn't inherently evil or anything. It's a tool, but it's a really powerful tool. So it can be used defensively or offensively. And a huge thanks to adversaries.com and globalcompliancemap.com for supporting us in this exploration. This dual-use aspect means we need to be smart about how we approach AI. Embrace its potential for good, but be ready for the possibility of misuse.
It's not enough to defend against attacks powered by AI. The Arctic Wolf post brings up another big concern: adversarial attacks that target AI systems themselves.
Right, that adds a whole other layer of complexity. Adversarial attacks are a real concern. Things like data poisoning, where someone tries to corrupt the data an AI model learns from, or backdoor attacks, where hidden vulnerabilities are intentionally introduced into the AI system. There are also inference and extraction attacks, where the goal is to steal sensitive information from the model, and prompt injection attacks, where the attacker manipulates the AI's behavior. These attacks can really mess with the integrity and security of AI deployments.
So we have to protect our systems from AI, but also protect the AI systems themselves. It's like a double-edged sword. And Arctic Wolf also pointed out that large language models, LLMs, can sometimes produce vulnerable code or respond to dangerous prompts. That's something developers need to be very aware of.
For sure. If you're relying on AI to write code, there's always a chance it might contain security flaws. And the fact that these models can respond to bad prompts, well, it shows how important it is to build in strong security measures. Like, we need to create guardrails to prevent them from being misused.
All this really highlights how important collaboration is. Researchers, AI developers, companies, everyone needs to work together to make sure AI is developed and deployed securely. We got to stay ahead of the bad guys.
Absolutely. Sharing information, creating best practices, and constantly evaluating the security implications of AI are going to be crucial. And one more shout out to our fantastic sponsors, adversaries.com and globalcompliancemap.com, for making this conversation possible. Their support is invaluable.
So to wrap up this deep dive, the big takeaway is that this new framework gives us a much better way to understand and prepare for the rise of AI-powered cyberattacks. By focusing on the whole cyber attack chain and finding those points where AI could disrupt the traditional costs and challenges for attackers, we can start to build better defenses.
And it's super important for everyone to remember, focus on those bottleneck stages where attackers are weakest. And don't forget about those often overlooked areas, evasion and persistence, where AI could really give attackers a leg up.
Understanding this framework can help you, the listener, think differently about cybersecurity. We need to be proactive, not reactive. We need to anticipate the threats, not just respond to them.
It's a mindset shift, from reacting to known threats to actually anticipating how AI will reshape the entire threat landscape.
And that brings up a question for everyone listening. As AI keeps getting smarter, how will our definition of the cost of a cyber attack change? And what new defensive strategies will we need to develop to stay ahead of the curve? It's definitely something to think about, and hey, maybe even explore some of the research we've talked about today to learn more.
Yeah, this is just the beginning. AI and cybersecurity, it's a constantly evolving landscape, so we need to keep learning and adapting if we want to stay safe.
Stay curious, keep digging deeper, and we'll see you on the next Deep Dive.